One of the more prevalent things I'm seeing right now daily is these scams. They're not just a pig butchering scam, it's wrapped up in a romance. It's not just a tech scam or a job scam. It's wrapped up in an investment scam. So it makes the conversation even that much more challenging because now not only are you telling somebody they're out of their money, they're out of their relationship. That is one of our bigger challenges right now. Hi, I'm Jen Lamont.
I'm Hailey Windham.
I'm Bri Valleskey, and this is Good Question, a podcast about AI for fraud fighters and risk leaders from your friends at Inscribe. In this episode, we are celebrating women in fraud. Women constitute approximately 55% of fraud prevention specialists in the U.S., surpassing their male counterparts at 44%. But despite strong representation in specialist roles, women are underrepresented in leadership positions with the fraud prevention and payments sectors. As of early 2025, women occupy only 18% of C-suite and board leadership roles in financial institutions, highlighting a significant disparity at the highest levels of decision-making. So I am very excited to be joined by two incredible women in fraud on the show today to highlight their voices, learn about the fraud and scams that they're concerned about right now, and explore where they think the fraud industry is headed. First, we have Jen Lamont. Jen is a credit union BSA compliance officer and fraud manager. She's a certified fraud examiner and Bank Secrecy Act compliance specialist, and she was recognized by the Noble as a 2024 award winner for excellence in the fight against human crime for her work on elder fraud prevention. Jen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you ladies today.
We have Hailey Windham with us as well. Hailey is the host of the Banking on Fraudology podcast. She's a certified financial crime specialist, and she was named a 2023 Credit Union Rockstar by CUNA. She's also a board member of Operation Shamrock, which is an organization dedicated to education and support for victims of pig butchering and transnational organized crime, which I think is such important work. So, Hailey, thank you so much for joining us today as well.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you again for inviting me.
Absolutely. Honestly, you both are so impressive. I'm definitely having imposter syndrome.
You definitely
That's
should
we're
not.
having a great show today.
Most days I have no idea what I'm doing. Or it feels like I don't know what I'm doing.
Me. So I am so looking forward to chatting with you both because we had the pleasure of meeting at Fraud Fight Club about a month ago now. And for this episode, I'd just love to explore some of the trends and themes that emerge from a lot of the conversations that were being had at Fraud Fight Club. And one of the first questions that I know I was asking everyone at the event was, how did you get into fraud fighting and why have you stayed in the industry? Hailey, when I chatted with you, you had said, quote, I just fell into it. So can you recap your origin story and talk about why fraud is a career you sort of fall into?
Absolutely. So I don't think any of us started out by saying, yes, I want to be a fraud fighter. I mean, now I preach it, and I hope that whenever I talk to young kids, they're like, oh, I want to be a fraud fighter. But that wasn't how it started. I began as a teller at a small hometown bank. I actually went in for a mortgage and walked out with the job application because she said, you've come in so organized. Have you ever thought about working at a bank? And I was like, no, but yes, now I will. And so I submitted my application, started as a teller, and then 3 months in, there was a request to help with some reporting in our bookkeeping department. I went up, fell in love with the manager there. She liked me as well, and then took me under her wing, taught me everything about operations and how the payments flow through and balancing reconciliation, doing, DDA deposits, things like that. And so just really understanding how the bank itself works and being able to put all the puzzle pieces together to balancing everything. And I got bored with that a little after I got started, and not bored that I didn't like the work. I loved the work, but there wasn't enough of it. I was done with my day at about 10:30 every day. And then I would wait until the second check file drop at midday. And then I had something else to do. And then I'd wait some more until it was 5 o'clock and then time to go home. And so I'm a chatty person, obviously. And I would go downstairs and talk with the tellers and talk with the CSRs. And they were like, we got to get Hailey something else to do. So they gave me debit card fraud, and I loved it. It was a puzzle that I couldn't quite figure out. It was one that I was challenged first by my CFO to prevent losses. And then it was a personal challenge to stop the fraud before it ever even happens. And so it wasn't a career that I started out wanting, but it's definitely one that I've stayed in because I want to be here.
That is just an absolutely incredible story. I love how you were immediately passionate about just like the inner working of a bank and financial institution and the idea of putting all the puzzle pieces together. And I love that they just handed you debit card fraud and you're like, yes, this is amazing. So just passion shines through in your story. Jen, your story is also really fascinating and fun, in my opinion. Would you mind recapping your journey from a degree in Russian literature to credit union admin role?
Yeah, it is similar to Hailey. I did not seek out to become a fraud fighter, although I'm very grateful for the journey. I actually worked at a concrete company doing everything from the only thing I didn't do was drive the trucks. I batched concrete, I did quality control, sales, I mean, everything. But there was an ownership change. So I found myself without a job for the first time since I was like, 11 or 12 years old. And I told my husband, I can't not work. I got to find a job. I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. And I was still working on my associate's degree at that time. And so I picked up the newspaper and there was this role at my credit union, and the credit union that I had my car loan through, and it was my first loan on my own. So I remember thinking, these are the first people that treated me like an adult. I would love to work at this place. And I applied for the position, and it was an admin role. I had zero idea at 22 years old what loss prevention and compliance meant. So I get the job because it's answering phones and working reports and stuff like that. And it wasn't until my first day where I was like, oh, this is the fraud department. That's interesting. In the first few years of my career, I started out as part-time in admin, and the gal that was doing Reg claims left. And so her position opened up, and, I had been working there for a little while. And so I kind of naturally slid into that role. And I thought, wow, these investigations they're insane. I mean, at that time, teenagers were selling their debit cards and PIN numbers, and then organized crime rings were filtering bad checks through the ATM machines. And I remember thinking, this has got to be the worst fraud I'm ever going to see. But in the midst of my career, I don't know that I quite realized. I was very young when I started out in this industry. So I don't think I really realized it was my career for quite a while. And I was a few years in when I told my husband, I was like, I think I want to go back to school. I've always wanted to finish my degree. He goes, well, what do you want to go for? And I said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I signed up for these history programs. And I was like, well, I'll kind of jump in. I don't really know what I can always change later. Fell in love with history. And it's obviously nothing. I mean, there's historical fraud, but history and fraud are two very, very different subjects. But I just fell in love with it. It was more of a personal goal of mine to finish my education. And in the midst of my degree, my husband and I decided to have kids. And so I got pregnant with my daughter, and my history professor took me on as a contract student. So my pregnancy wouldn't disrupt my graduation schedule. He taught Russian literature. His focus was Russian history and Russian lit. So with my liberal arts degree, I have the most credits in Russian literature. So I technically have a Russian literature. But my daughter was 10 months old when I walked across the stage. So I'm pretty proud of it.
Wow. Yes, congrats. That's a huge accomplishment. Oh my gosh. Working moms are seriously such superheroes. And what's fascinating is I actually feel like there is a correlation between fraud prevention and history. There's this overlapping area of investigation, putting the pieces together,
Absolutely.
solving the puzzle. So in an interesting way, it kind of makes a lot of sense. What is really special about, it was so cheesy, but like about both of your stories too, is that it starts with you both going to a financial institution at this very important part of your life, or like having a connection to it through getting a loan, because financial services is one of the most important industries in the world because of the impact it has in people's lives. And like fraud and risk, I think, is one of the most important roles in the industry, because you're making these decisions to both help protect people from fraud, but also enable them to get access to a lot of these financial products. Speaking of your role and how you came into it, I think your team structure is really interesting. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, having BSA and fraud under one umbrella for your career, and like what benefits or how does that influence how you approach fraud prevention?
Yeah, the funny thing is I didn't realize that wasn't how financial institutions did it.
Nice.
Because both institutions, and I've only worked for 2 credit unions in my 20-year career, and both institutions do it the same way. What I really love about it, is the cross collaboration.
Right.
You can't really have fraud without BSA, and you can't really have BSA without fraud. There's such a
Yeah.
crossover between the two. that even if you're not in the same department or under the same umbrella, I think it is so crucial for those two areas to really collaborate well and work together and share information.
Totally.
I'm in the midst of a policy review right now. And just as I was reading my 80-page policy, it talks a lot about the crossover between fraud and BSA, and even like subpoenas. Part of your BSA program is recognizing suspicious activity. A subpoena doesn't always mean there's been suspicious activity, but it can mean they're getting subpoenaed for a reason.
Right.
So I think those tasks are a lot of times divided up into several different areas. And I think it just highlights the need to break down the silos, build bridges, work together, and collaborate as much as you can.
Wow, that is such a strong point. I love focusing on breaking down the silos between all the areas that touch fraud and risk and compliance too, because to your point, there is so much overlap.
I completely agree with the collaborative effort that Jen's talking about. It's so hard as a fraud fighter that if BSA is already aware of something and it does follow a pattern of fraud, if they're not alerting the fraud team, because the fraud team can react now. The BSA team has to wait their time. They've got to wait a certain amount of days. They've got to develop a pattern. Then they've got to send notification that fraud or that suspicious activity might be occurring. But if fraud is also involved and happening at the same time, those fraud fighters can step in right now and can do something to prevent it from either escalating or can look to see what gaps are being, exposed right now, where are vulnerabilities, and how is this able to work. So that collaboration that Jen's talking about is so crucial when you have these groups that are in silos that really shouldn't be.
I love that point too, just in terms of when the groups are collaborating, you can respond to a threat, both in terms of being reactive from the investigation side of it, but also proactive from the fraud prevention and examining your policies or what might prevent something in the future. Hailey, you work with a lot of different credit unions that are resource strapped and might not know what tools they do have or how to better collaborate across these teams. What's one of the most impactful changes you've helped a credit union make recently, or what's a trend that you think credit unions should be aware of?
It's all about the culture, the fraud fighting culture, and whether or not it is the same at the top that it is at the bottom. So if your frontline doesn't understand how your executives feel about fraud, or if you as an organization have not made your direct statement of this is what fraud is, this is how we will react when fraud happens, or this is what we will do to prevent fraud, it's a mind shift that has to happen across the entire organization. One of the great things I did at my credit union before I left was actually instituting that fraud savvy culture where truly it spread like COVID. Everybody caught it and everybody wanted it or didn't want it, but everybody got it even if they didn't want it, because it was something that was just it was very catchy, because it was, oh, wow, I can make a difference by doing something for fraud. And so even if they were resistant to it, they eventually gave in because it was something that it was very easy to do something about. By simply saying something seems odd, I'm going to tell the fraud person about it. Then being able to do that as like a consultant coming in and being able to have conversations where your fraud team and your BSA team are like, we just don't get it. The front line won't do what they're supposed to do. Let's talk to the front line, but you're not going to be a part of this conversation. Let us just have the conversation and find out truly where the miscommunication is. And when we're able to do that and go in and have these conversations and say, okay, just no holds bar, what's your issue with fraud? And when they say, we feel like there's no open communication, when we report something, we don't know what's going on. Or, yeah, we get these alerts, but oftentimes it's, hey, you've done something wrong, instead of, hey, let's work together to fix, either a procedural issue or a systems issue. And truly also not understanding how the frontline systems work. A lot of times we've got back office people who are very frustrated with frontline not responding the way they think they should. But in reality, they don't know the systems that the frontline is having to work with. You can read a policy and a procedure document all day long, but until you've pressed the button, you don't know what it's like to sit in that seat. So being able to recognize that there's some issues with frontline, there's some issues with the back office communicating to the frontline, here's how you can fix it. The culture shift and the mindset that changes between both of those groups is really just phenomenal to watch, where they both want to help, they both want to do, but there was just a little bit of miscommunication. And once you fix that and you bridge that gap, magic happens and fraud can be prevented. It can be detected and you can resolve it going forward.
Wow. I think that is incredible and so powerful just in terms of how do you actually break down the silos between these two teams? And really, it is an exercise of communication, like shared understanding of what each team is doing and like how they're prioritizing, but also just objectively, how do we address the problem of fraud together? And I think just the fraud savvy culture that you mentioned is so powerful as well, like creating a culture where everyone's feels comfortable to talk about suspected fraud and doesn't feel like they're bringing up issues or just like being a squeaky wheel. Because when you're able to prioritize it to your point from the top, like the company knows that they want people to speak up if they see something that's off. And I've talked to other fraud fighters who have a channel that's suspected fraud and everyone just like drops some of their thoughts in there too. So I think creating that culture where you can talk about it openly, but also reach across the aisle, so to speak, and talk about it with other teams too is very powerful.
I think it is absolutely crucial that back office and frontline, they're not two teams. We're all the same team. And we get over that. They did something wrong. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. Have we taught them what we know? Have we shared with them what to look for? Really putting ourselves in their shoes and having some empathy. Our frontline team members, they have a lot on their plate. They're having to help members. They've got somebody in their face. I've never experienced that. I've been back office my whole career, but I have worked with plenty of individuals who come from front office to back office, and having those conversations and understanding the challenges. They have sales focuses and they have a different focus than we do. We can't expect them to work like fraud fighters. Number one, if we don't teach them to work like fraud fighters. And number two, if we don't take into consideration all of the things that they have in their data. So it is really trying to work together, understand each other, and also share that we're not the big bad compliance department. It took me a while to understand that. I sent a message to a frontline staff person. This has probably been a decade ago. But I was like, hey, is this you? And I was trying to locate a transaction that happened in the branch. And the only way for me to do that was identify the teller who processed the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think I gave this poor young man a heart attack. He was like, why? Why do you need to know? Yes, I was like, I had no understanding that me coming at him with no context, no background, and just saying, hey, did you do this? He panicked. And I was like, it was like this light bulb moment for me where I was like, okay, I know my intention for that conversation. He didn't. So now I approach those situations with context and background and, hey, I'm just trying to figure out when this transaction occurred, who conducted the transaction. You're not in trouble. You've done nothing wrong. But it was this realization that there is a misconception about audit, compliance, fraud. We're always attacking because something went wrong. We're always coming at you because you did something wrong. Absolutely not. So I think that's where the bridging the gap and, having relationships and showing up in person. We just started implementing quarterly fraud workshops, and we've done 2 now, and they've really changed the atmosphere. It's changed the conversation. Our team members of all parts of the organization now truly understand the scams that we're facing, the challenges that we're facing.
Wow.
You cannot solve these problems alone. These problems affect everybody. And the more we can collaborate, I think the better we can do for our communities and society in general.
And I love what Jen is saying too about quarterly updates, because fraud is not just your annual training that you get once a year. Fraud is consistently changing and updating. And when you have the approach that Jen does, which is that open communication, that transparency of this is what we're seeing, this is how you can, effectively combat it. These are your resources. This is what this looks like. She is giving her team, she's empowering them by giving them everything they need to know about what she knows and about how they can move on or how they can detect and how they can alert her to any situation that's going on in the branch. So I think Jen is doing a great job of doing just that, of saying, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what you need to know. And I'll be back in a couple of months and I'll tell you what's updated since then. So kudos to Jen.
And also just a quick shout out to one of my team members, Monica. She spent almost 20 years on the front line. We actually started in the banking world the same year and the world brought us together. Her frontline perspective has changed my perspective and has helped me learn and grow with more collaborative thought process, and just she's able to go, this is what the frontline experience is. And she's now a BSA person after almost 20 years on the front line, and it's been magic in my opinion.
Wow. I, first of all, love how much you all are uplifting each other and other people in the industry as well. That is just exciting and invigorating to see. And yes, because fraud is evolving, I think this idea of a quarterly update for internally for your team, that education, that enablement around this is the fraud we're seeing, here's what you can do, and here's what to expect from us. And we'll be back in a quarter to tell you like how fraud has evolved and come back with any updates. And just keep your team aligned. Like that creates an open line of communication and shows them that we are here to support you. We want to enable growth. We're not punitive. If I'm asking you a question, it's not because you're in trouble. So I just love that as a lever for opening that line of communication. And I also really appreciate just the empathy that you have for your internal team members as well, in terms of understanding that the more we can educate and enable them, the better they can work with us and help us. And of course, fraud fighters are just so full of empathy. It's the greatest group of people in the whole world. And obviously empathy for a lot of customers and potential victims of scams as well. And scams are something we talked about a lot at Fraud Fight Club. Jen, specifically, you mentioned that you sometimes speak to scam victims daily and you still consult with them and try to educate and enable them. And I think that is so meaningful and just thoughtful of you to do, because it is hard sometimes to hear people talk about the hardship they're going through, but the fact that you're willing to extend that hand and reach out to them and offer that help, I think is so amazing. And I'm just curious how that those conversations shape how you or your team design fraud prevention strategies.
Oh my gosh, I think it's everything. It is probably one of the most challenging parts, but also one of the most rewarding parts of the work that we do.
Yeah.
When you hear somebody's voice after they've lost their mortgage payment, their rent payment, the losses, and it's different for everybody. I've had individuals react differently to $1,500 than somebody else reacts to $50,000.
Sure.
It's all subjective. It's all a matter of where you're at in life and your resiliency for a lot of different things. And a lot of victims of scams are victims of scams because they're already in a vulnerable situation. They're already in a position in life where it's challenging. And I think, hearing those stories day after day, it does sometimes take an emotional toll. We have little team therapy sessions once in a while where if one of us deals with something really heavy, we'll drop everything and get on a Zoom call together, because we're primarily remote or hybrid.
Sure.
We'll get on a team call and just kind of decompress. And number one, is there something we could have done to catch this sooner? Is there a different type of conversation we could have had? So it's not about beating ourselves up. It's about educating ourselves and learning from every instance. I think that's just part of the bigger picture of preventing, is understanding what's happening. And I think if we continue to keep it human-centered, how is this affecting you? I just think that the better we can use things like AI and stuff like that to prevent harm to people.
I just think it's beautiful that you care so much to speak with people and really think about how can we help them and how can we prevent this in the future. And I am sure those customers really appreciate it as well. And it makes me think of something, Hailey, that you mentioned during our chat at Fraud Fight Club, which is we're losing generational wealth to scams. That's so powerful. What kind of scams are you seeing right now that you feel are especially dangerous or under discussed?
I think it's the fact that the scam changes, right? So we may teach on tech support scams, right? Well, if you've trained your people, your consumers, your members on tech support scams, that's what they're prepared for. But what we're noticing, because we're having these victim calls with Operation Shamrock too, is that sometimes our training is too specific, and sometimes it's not specific enough. Sometimes we focus too much on one thing and we say, okay, if you get a Microsoft pop-up, okay, well, it's not a Microsoft pop-up. It pops up as something else. So they're not thinking in that moment, oh yeah, I was warned about this, because we're not saying everything that is specific about the one thing. But then on the other hand, if we told them that, hey, if Secret Service reaches out to you and there's a pop-up on the Bitcoin ATM that they're depositing in, and it says if the government reaches out to you, they're not thinking about it in that moment because it is that fight or flight, and they're not pausing to think about the transaction. So in everything that we've talked about, and when we talk to these victims, what we're finding out is that it starts out as maybe a job scam. Well, then they get kind of suspicious about the job scam. So then it turns into an investment scam. And
Yes.
so as they are working through and they're trying to, they even have the red flags, they even have their own suspicions. And then they found these workarounds for the suspicions. Oh, well, if you think this is not real, here, I'll put in some of my money with you. So you know that I'm going to be in on this too. And then, so now they've got that level of comfort where, okay, I'll put in some money because this person's put in some money. Well, then at the end, when they are being told, hey, you got to pay a fee to get your money out, if it's a pig butchering scam, for an example, then they go, oh, a fee, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to pay a fee. Well, you need to pay this fee because I'm out my money. So now they've got guilt that this scammer gave money as well, and that they've got to make sure they can pay them back. So what I think it is, honestly, is just that the scam changes so much, and our marketing people are so worried about doing drip campaigns or just doing something where they bring up fraud every other month and they don't talk about it all the time and consistently. They don't want to have, live in-person events because they don't want people to associate their brand with fraud. And it's like, we've got to get beyond that, and we've got to start advocating for more fraud awareness in our communities. We as individuals need to step up. We need to do more of the train the trainer sessions. And really, we just need, I go out once a month now. That's my goal, is to go out once a month and talk to a church elder group, and I tell them everything. And I go, hey, I'm about to give you a ton of information, and some of it may go over your head, but stop me if you have questions. Because it's important for you to understand that if this doesn't work and you are able to, bypass or not be manipulated by this tactic, here's another one that they're going to try. And then they're going to try this one. And hey, by the way, if someone passes away, don't put your home address on the obituary because they're going to come for you. Don't put your home phone number. Don't do things that are going to make you an easier target than someone else. And then if you do feel like you have become a part of a scam, reach out to your financial institution. That's one of the things that I really preach, is that if you've got suspicions, go to your financial institution and they are equipped to tell you what is a red flag or not. And they can help you work through those suspicions. So I kind of got on a soapbox, but I think that for me, what the issue and what's really dangerous is that the scam changes. They don't just target them one way, they target them all the ways because they know it works.
That is probably one of the more prevalent things I'm seeing right now daily, is these scams. They're not just a pig butchering scam. It's wrapped up in a romance. It's not just a tech scam or a job scam. It's wrapped up in an investment scam. So it makes the conversation even that much more challenging, because now not only are you telling somebody they're out of their money, they're out of their relationship. That's a lot of heaviness to share with somebody in one conversation. So that is one of our bigger challenges right now, is the complexity of these scams. And the scammers are so good. You hear that feedback all the time. I can't believe they fell for that. I can't believe they fell for that. Talk to these people. You can't. If you talk to these victims, you have no question on how this scam was successful with this person, whether it is their life circumstances, their mental health, their financial health, life is hard.
We're all vulnerable.
Scammers, in the worst moments of these people's lives, and they burrow in and they have no shame and they have no problem taking every single person for everything that they're worth and really preying on those vulnerabilities. It is, speaking of soapbox,
every person has a trigger.
Yes, every person.
It's just a matter of finding it.
Yeah, and all of us are going to be vulnerable at different points in our lives. To your point, we all go through hardships that leave us vulnerable. And it's, I don't know, interesting, scary, frustrating that the scams themselves, the stories, the offers, not only keep changing, but are increasing in complexity and becoming like, we don't want to make light of it, but like a turducken of a scam, where it's the romance scam and an investment scam. And it is tough because there's so much emotional manipulation brought into it that it's hard to educate people beyond saying like, well, if it's too good to be true, if it feels urgent, if you feels off, like slow down. but that's not a foolproof thing. And I really liked, Hailey, what you highlighted as well. Just like, you're not alone. If you feel something is suspicious, just reach out to your financial institution, and someone there can help you, or at least give you some answers.
There's so much focus on education. And there are things that come up that just remind me of how important our mission is. Gives me that, kind of boost to keep going. We just had a victim who, one of the key pieces of her losing a good chunk of money was she actually reached out to her local law enforcement, and they reviewed what she showed them. Part of it was she had gotten a deposit from one of the cryptocurrency investments. Well, they saw that and they validated, oh, well, since it's push-pull, and this is fine. So no fault of the law enforcement agency. They just haven't been educated.
Right.
These scams can look different. Yes, I might be able to pull out $597, but I've also sent $6,500 and then $26,000. And, but they're looking at it from just, well, you were able to take some of that money back, so it should be fine. So she kept going because her local PD validated the scam. And so that was just a couple of weeks ago. And it just reminds me that we've got a big job ahead of us.
Absolutely. And that was a beautiful way to summarize it too. Let's move on to our lightning round, which I actually didn't prepare either of you for this, but in every episode,
Fair warning, everyone. We are
no
telling what will come out of my mouth.
Hailey, you and me
we actually bring on ChatGPT. And so we are going to ask ChatGPT to generate an image of a fraud fighter. And then we're actually going to test this using both a regular prompt and their new create an image feature. Recent updates to OpenAI have made it easier than ever to create a lot of these images, especially ones that are photorealistic. The update uses new autoregressive models that generate images pixel by pixel instead of refining noise like diffusion models. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen between the two chats. But also, before we look at this other chat, let's answer this question. So ChatGPT wants to know, can you clarify a bit about what we envision for Fraud Fighter? Ooh, human AI agent, superhero, detective style, modern or vintage look, office, digital world, crime solving environment, and the gender outfit, suit, armor, hoodie.
I like the PJ Rohal style hoodie.
PJ Rohal. PJ's got it out there in the universe of what a fraud fighter looks like.
All right, let's go hoodie. Let's just see what we put hoodie and baseball. All right, okay. Well, this is the first image we get. Jen, do you want to take a crack at describing the image we're looking at right here?
I feel like I'm looking at a police officer on the front line of a protest with a shield that says fraud. It has one of those like big Mr. Yuck sticker with the big red circle and a magnifying glass.
This is Austin Harris and Mark Evans in an emoji picture. This is the cop that we have that's out there fighting fraud.
Heck yes.
I love it. Yes. I love his giant magnifying glass. Great. Okay.
I think my granddaddy has one that looks that big. Like
my grandma did too with her weekly crossword puzzle.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. All right, let's see what our other one generated when we said a fraud fighter. Okay.
This is PJ Rohal right here.
It's a mix. I feel like it looks a little bit more like Ronald, though.
It does look like Ronald, yeah.
It's like if you combined PJ and Ronald fraud together into one person, and this sign that apparently it's again a fraud with a red circle through it, but it doesn't look like his person's holding it. It's just kind of
just on him.
It's just on him. I did note that both of the fraud fighters that it came up with were men, so it's
men.
Yep. And also very serious. Like Yes. Anything else that Hailey or Jen you notice about these photos?
Both of them look kind of angry, not just serious, but a little bit angry. And I mean, I can get pretty angry at the fraudsters, but for the most part, my day to day, I definitely don't.
You don't have furrowed eyebrows all day.
No.
I will say the create image is more like flat, whereas the other one is more, it looks more like a really cool comic book.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. That is super interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for doing that fun exercise.
It is fun.
That is a wrap on another episode of Good Questions. Special thank you to both of our guests, Hailey and Jen. It was seriously such a pleasure to have you on. I feel like I could have talked to you guys all day. I had so much fun in this conversation that I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did the same. So we can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I say that every time I get together with you ladies. I feel like we could do this for an entire weekend. It wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we need to have like a fraud fighter woman's getaway, and we all just sit around a pool and drink mimosas and talk about fraud, because we could do it.
That is my literal dream come true.
We're going to make it happen.
We're going to make it happen. I love it.
Do this.